I always liked playing live, but it always seemed very momentary. Like it was all very like an event kind of thing where you like get ready for this tour, you get ready for this big show, or you're playing in this band and getting ready for some showcase or whatever it is. And it always felt like these were just glimpses and moments of like of your art, and like it always like ended very quickly.
All right. I'm here with one of my good friends.
What up?
Luke the man Saison, King Luke as he's known.
King Luke.
Yeah, Luke and I. Well, first, how you doing, Luke?
Good. Surviving. It's been good in here.
Hanging out in your studio apartment.
Yes.
Awesome.
This is where I spend like 24 hours of my day and like 7 days a week, except for church, pretty much.
So pretty much this crazy learning stuff, nothing's really changed for you.
Right. If anything, I've got more work done. All the stuff I've been avoiding doing, like all the like taxes and like setting up finance things and like signing up for whatever, I've actually gotten done because no one like wants to come over and write right now. With fair. No, so I'm like still getting work done, which is good, I guess.
That's awesome.
It's fun.
So I was just thinking, I don't really remember when you and I met for the first time. Do you remember?
It's probably a Steak and Shake.
Steak and Shake. I do remember that. I got pulled over for speeding on the way to Steak and Shake and home twice in one night. That night.
Was it in that van or the?
It was in my old like black car. It was me and Bryson.
Yes.
I was
the one that we drove back to Bernie.
Oh yeah, that one. Yeah. Oh yeah, we should get into that. But yeah, I remember that now. But the first time I remembered really was you came and saw the Bryson and I's little project.
Yes. Fox Fluorescent.
Yeah, we played.
That was fun.
I remember you there.
I remember going to that just because Evan Dominguez was playing drums. Because I didn't really know you guys. And being confused about the Boy Scout in the corner and the random poetry reading that you guys had in that show. Yeah. And then I distinctly remember you had a koala on like in your earring or something, and you had the dread. So I don't remember if it was in your earring or in your dress, but it was awesome.
Yeah, I had koala earrings.
It was amazing.
Yeah, and then I think not too long after that, I asked Grace, who was my girlfriend at the time, now obviously my wife and mother to my children.
And your baby mama.
So when we were starting the new band, I was like, hey, does that guy Luke, is he pretty good at drums? And she was like, I think so. And then that was kind of how we started playing together, I think.
I think I asked you to play drums for when Pina was doing some random Lipscomb gig. Oh, and you were like, no, I can't do drums that day, but do you want to come play for this other band I'm working on? It's like, nice. All right, I guess.
That's awesome. But before that, so let's start all the way, go back to the beginning. Where was little Luke born? I mean, I know, but for our thousands of viewers.
For all the thousands of you out there, 25 years ago, my parents gave birth to me in the stunning islands of New Zealand in Tauranga, I believe. And we lived there. My parents are missionaries, so they basically just get bored of places and go to different places to live and spread the gospel. And so I was born there, and my younger brother was born there too. But then I think I was like 3 or 4, and we moved to the Philippines. And that's where I spent like until like high school or 8th grade or something like that in the Philippines. So that's kind of what I call home right now, or like heritage-wise, just because it's what feels like home. So yeah.
So you would say you're Filipino?
Yeah, I'd say that. And my dad's Filipino, so like by blood. So it's like makes sense to say that.
And your dad grew up on Guam, right?
Right. So he's like American,
Gotcha.
just brown.
And he was a musician, right?
Yeah. So my dad's whole side of the family is like super musical. I guess one of our uncles does like all of the jingles for all of the TV shows on like in the Philippines or like on some channel. He does like all of the like intro jingles and in the middle things. And then one of my dad's cousins is like the queen of R&B at one point in the Philippines. So the whole family is like really musical. And so him and his brothers used to go around the island and do the music thing. And as much as you can do on Guam, it's a small island. So that's kind of the musical side of it all, which was cool.
Is that how you got into playing music?
We got into it because our mom was very much, so she was an athlete and my dad was a musician. So kind of both ends of the spectrum, but they always told us that they wanted us to be like well-rounded. So they made us all do sports and then all learn piano.
Gotcha.
And then once we'd done like a year or so of piano, we could figure out whatever other instrument was, there was. And I remember there was a Christmas we spent on Guam and we went to I think it was a cassette store. I think it was actually only cassettes in there. And I picked up a DC Talk cassette, which was awesome. Nice. And I was blown away because it was just rap the whole time. And I was like, I want to do that with the rest of my life. And my dad was like, yeah, you should learn how to play drums or bass then, because then you really get the rhythm side. Nice. And that's kind of where that's what I started liking music, was when I started banging on drums with sticks. So
on the
drummies.
So if you did top 3 most inspirational albums to you as young Luke,
no. So embarrassing. Well, my number 1 album is Comatose by Skillet.
Okay.
That album changed my world.
All right.
And then DC Talk. I don't even know. It's the one with Heaven Bound on it. I think it's just called DC Talk. But there was like the cover of it. It was a cassette, so the cover of it was like that super. I guess it's vintage now, but I guess it was cool at the time, where it's like really grainy, and they were like looking all like hard at you. You didn't realize that they were like a Christian band who went to Liberty. And it's like, okay. And awesome. So those 2, and then the third one is probably one of my cousins gave me an X-Rock 2001, which was like a big deal because our parents wouldn't let us listen to like non-Christian music. They didn't say we couldn't, but we kind of knew that if we brought,
it just wasn't in the house.
It was kind of looked down on. So to have like a CD that I could play whenever I wanted to, that was all like rock and roll, I was like, yeah. And it had like Reliant K and FM Static and like all those
nice
interesting bands from the early thousands. It was cool.
So when did Alicia Keys come into the picture for?
Oh my gosh, my awakening. I don't know. I feel like I remember the first time I heard an Alicia Keys song. I think it was Diary, with Tony Tone, and it was on back in the day when you used to burn CDs for your friends. Yeah. My sister went to some birthday party, and as like a party favor, they burnt CDs for them. And I remember it was like a basketball on the cover for some reason, and it said "My Birthday" on it, and that was one of the songs on there. I just remember I still listen to that song maybe once a month, just because it I don't know, it was just really cool. And then I started listening to the rest of her stuff, and
that's awesome.
My world was opened wide.
So you moved. So now you're back. You moved from the Philippines to the States,
right.
And you were still playing music, I guess. I'm guessing. I don't really know too much about that time in your life.
I kind of was, I guess.
You were in Florida, right?
Yeah, we moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and I don't think I cared about music so much, but my sister really did a lot of music, so I was like, okay, I guess I got to do music for fun too. Yeah. But I always thought I would do sports or whatever was cool at the time. Yeah. And we wanted to start a youth group band because we didn't have one, and we all thought it was lame that we didn't have one. I don't know why. So we were gung ho about it, and this guy named John Lumpkin III kind of started going to our church and was doing a lot of worship stuff, and then him and Lauren Clemens was another youth leader. and they both were like, okay, we'll start a band for you guys, and started teaching us how to play and like rehearsing songs and stuff. And that was kind of like the first time I was like, oh, okay, this is actually kind of fun, and like kind of like doing this more than running in circles around a track every day. And
Was that with all you guys, or just Kelsey and?
it was just me and Kelsey because our other siblings were too young
Gotcha.
to like do it. I think like the first like music thing that we all did as a family was we used to every year we would do Christmas carols, like we're real little. And I think I remember we always fought for some reason, like when we were like practicing to do them. And one year we just like we all just fought so much that our mom was like, okay, fine, we're not doing it this year. And I think that was the same year that we started doing the youth band. I don't know why that like coincides, but
Gotcha.
it was interesting.
So then you went from Florida, and then you came to Tennessee.
Good old Nashville.
And you were here for a couple years, right? And then, I mean, you're still here, but there was a couple years that passed. And then how old were you when we met?
That was my senior, my freshman year of college, I think.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so we moved to Nashville my senior year of high school. And then I think it was my freshman year of college that you and I met. Which I don't know how old I was then. 2014 would be the year. Yeah. So it wasn't very long here.
Yeah.
When we moved here, I met a friend named Brenna McCamey, and she was the first one who like I met that actually truly loved music, that like was always looking for new like songs and new records and like new artists to listen to. And I thought that was so cool because she would always give us like things to listen to and like playlists or whatever it was. And that was like mind blowing to me that you could like more than just the 3 CDs that you had in your car deck at the time. And you can like look for them online and all that. So that was cool. That was like senior year, freshman college was just me like listening to everything that I could, because it was like I didn't know you could just do that. I thought you had to listen to these like 4 genres that you're into, but
yeah.
It was a weird couple years too. So that was fun.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you realize like, oh, I can just there's a lot of different types of music and genres that you might not have like been into when you were a kid.
Yeah.
Looking at them in a different way, where it's like, oh, these are actually really sick. Or
right.
When you can appreciate different parts of different types of music.
Right. Not just because it's loud or whatever.
Yeah. For sure.
That was always one of the interesting things about you that I think was always like interesting for me as like your friend, was that when I met you, I thought, okay, he's obviously into the hipster indie folk scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got to know you a little more. I was like, okay, so he's into like the grunge, like Nirvana stuff.
Yeah.
And then he's into this like propaganda underground hip hop. It's like every few years I'd learn some new band that you were like seriously into. That was like, oh, okay, it's a new Nolan to get to know.
For sure, yeah. I mean, for us, it was like we grew up on punk rock, but then like, you know, the punk rock thing was also, you were kind of into like underground hip hop. I mean, because they're essentially like the same thing. Right. I actually didn't really get into like more popular music, like pop music and mainstream music, until like later on. Like probably even, well, there was like I had a couple like things that I would listen to kind of discreetly when I was in like high school, like middle school.
But no one else could know about it, right?
Yeah. I remember when I realized like, oh man, Death Cab's actually pretty cool. But I just didn't tell anybody that I liked them.
No one can know that that's in your playlist.
But then, but like probably the second part of high school, out of high school, is when I started like getting into more like of the pop stuff. Yeah, it's cool. I think there's a lot of there's stuff that's, I don't know. I feel like I grew up on punk rock, but I can kind of find punk rock in anything. So it's like, yeah,
right. There's that spirit in whatever you listen to a little bit.
Cool. So
I feel about Alicia Keys.
For sure. I mean, I like Alicia Keys too. You know.
So sick.
But then I feel like when we met, you kind of like started diving into music and I don't know if you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed like you were kind of into music, but then after we met, not because of me, but I just feel like time wise, you started like getting heavier and like more seriously into music. And obviously for those thousands that don't know, we started a band with two other guys, our friends, Bryson and Eric. And then it felt like you kind of even went more and you were playing in some other bands and like doing some, I don't know. I felt like there was at one point there you were in like 7 bands.
It's a wild time.
You're just like playing with whoever.
It's fun though. Yeah. I remember, because if that like first 2 years was just discovering that you could like more than one genre of music and like you can find something you like about any style of music. Yeah. After I met you and we started doing Sunday Morning at the time, which was later Apollo Hotel, you know, for the thousands that don't know. I remember being
everybody knows who Apollo Hotel is.
Yes, I know. We were in that band. I wanted to keep it low key, but no. I remember thinking like, you could just do this. Like, you don't have to like have some big moment. Like we were just 4 dudes, and like I haven't really even hung out with any of them until the first rehearsal.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, you can just like show up and play, and it's fun, and you can play shows, and you don't have to like have this huge rigmarole around it. You can just go and do it. Mm-hmm. And then leave, and like, and it can just be fun and be creative, and like you can sweat and then go home and like do whatever you want after that. It doesn't have to be this huge life consuming thing to just have a good time with your buds and like enjoy music together. And it was interesting to play, because it was that playing with you guys in that band that was like kind of like the kind of corner change, like the turning the corner for me, where like music became like important to me in a sense. Yeah. And it really was just like, yeah, you can just write songs with your buds and go and play them in front of crowds of 200 to 500, whoever's there.
Yeah, for sure.
Like 2 people or 500 people was our audience changes.
Yeah.
But like, and it's fun either way. And it's like, I don't know, that feeling of, I don't know. That was like an interesting, that was kind of the like switch for me when it was like, oh, okay, music is worth time, you know? So.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that was Sunday Morning was the first time you were on the radio, right?
Yep. Lightning 100.
Do you remember that day when we were on?
That was wild. Because I don't remember. How did that work? Whereas like you send in your songs.
I think they tweeted out that they were going to start playing us.
Oh yes.
On the station, and then we all actually heard when they first played one of our songs on the, like we were all listening at the same time.
I remember that day. That was wild. That's such a surreal experience. Mm-hmm. You're like, oh wow, like I'm on the airwaves.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure.
It's not me forcing you to listen to it. It's like someone else chose to play it, you know? Mm-hmm. That was cool.
I just remember when they read our bio before they played, because we were like after coming back from a break when they played it the first time.
Right.
And they like read our bio, and I was like, I didn't recognize our bio for some reason. So I was like, this isn't us. And then
and you wrote it.
Yeah. And then they were like, and then they like said like, so they said like, I don't, oh man, I wish I can remember exactly. But then they said, this is their new song, Glimmer. And I was like, oh, that is us. But yeah, I mean, that was that's what I felt like for me, you know, looking on the outside, it seemed like that was kind of the time where you started taking it like kind of more seriously as far as like music and
yeah, totally.
Playing. And then, definitely. You know, we did the Sunday Morning thing, which was awesome. And we did that for a while. Actually, dude, check this out. I have our
oh my gosh,
our first show.
That was amazing. With the JHV.
JHV, which is now the New Respects.
So sick.
Yeah, they opened up for us this show, so take it.
Yeah. That was a wild show.
I also have this this one. Yes. You can see you looking pretty awesome right now.
I forgot about that poster. I had a professor that I was I went to class one day and my professor randomly just go, "Hey, congratulations, playing the cannery." I see. It's like, what the heck? It's like Asian calculus teacher. It's so funny.
I think what I do that Sunday morning had made the little dent was when someone found our T-shirts at Goodwill. That was
That's how you know you've made it. Any
yeah.
band out there, don't get discouraged.
People are giving away your T-shirts years later.
It's
Yeah.
all advertising.
So we did that. I mean, we did that for a while. You know, and then we kind of, I don't know how this will be interesting to get your perspective. Because we started talking with Capital, and then it was kind of like we just decided that we weren't going to do it. I mean, that was kind of like
kind of how it happened.
Like it was a very quick kind of like we all just kind of looked at each other and we're like, I don't know if we want to do this, but we never really like had the conversation. It was kind of weird. I don't know. What was your side of it?
It was interesting because it was always like when it started, it was just like everyone was gung ho, like this is what we're gonna do, you know, like we're gonna take the world by storm, or at least that's how it seemed. And then time went on, and people were getting married, and like priorities were changing with everybody, and I knew one of the guys just didn't want to be on the road, like because he had done some stuff and just decided that he didn't like it as much, so which is fair. And so it was always kind of weird to like keep doing things because it was like as time went on, we were playing pretty regularly.
Yeah.
We played a lot of shows, and it was like more and more we were finding subs to like replace people for like just one-time shows, and then eventually it was just like I think it was like some Christmas break, and like we just never got back to practice. That's like literally how it happened.
Yeah, that was kind of it was like we were talking with a rep from Capital. We were going in the office, and they weren't, it wasn't like a for sure thing, but then it just kind of seemed like it was like we all didn't really talk, but we all kind of had an understanding that it was like, maybe we don't want to do this. I mean, we got contracts from CSAC, and we just, I think we were the only one that signed yours.
I still have it. I checked my statements the other day. I got 1 penny because I haven't registered any songs in so long. It's so bad.
Like, but that was that was around that same time, and I feel like it was kind of a weird thing where we just kind of stopped,
Yeah.
But then
I think
okay.
I think it's interesting when you have a bunch of people doing something together, how much that like, especially with like it's only 4 people, and then we were kind of starting to add people on the periphery that were like handling different parts of it, and it was like very slow and like low key, but it's like the more other people you started to involve, the more important it was kind of like that we were all on the same page. And I don't think we never really had conversations about like longevity or like even like past these shows, like what do we want to do. We were kind of just playing show to show, and like you were like really looking for shows and I was looking for shows, and the other guys were finding like random gigs too, but it was like we were all just randomly like doing stuff, and the more minds that kind of get involved, the harder it is to kind of stay focused on that like take the world vision or whatever it is, unless you're all saying it to each other regularly. So it was weird, like we started adding more minds like just on the periphery, but we never really had those conversations. That also was like, okay, we had kind of felt natural to like let it slide.
Yeah, we had like a couple different managers and different at the time, like we went through a couple different people. Yeah, that was a trip.
There were a couple other labels too that had reached out to us.
For sure, yeah.
Besides just that Capital one.
Yeah. I mean, I think that was a fun time though.
That was fun.
I mean, we had a lot of laughs, a lot of hanging out.
Could you imagine if we had like found a way onto that label, how miserable we would all be?
That's true too.
None of us would be real friends anymore.
Just even like driving in taking your parents' van and loading it up with all the gear, and like, I mean, that stuff was fun, man.
That was fun.
And practicing at T-Dalt's house.
Yes, I miss that man.
Yeah, I mean, that was cool. But then, so at the time though, we were kind of, you and I were working at the same place where I still work. And then, kind of after that, I mean, I guess it was a while. But I'm trying to think, who did you play with? Well, then you started touring, right? Well, you were just playing drums for
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. We were doing Apollo Hotel, and then I helped start this other band, Rainy, which was ridiculously awesome. They were so sick. We had the craziest shows too. It was cool. And I played in a couple other groups just because they were asking me, and then got a touring gig for summers and did that while working as the fulfillment associate.
But
Having
then,
fun.
yeah, but then you took the jump. And I'm trying to think, I don't think we're jumping ahead, but then you took the jump to where, you were decided to go like the producer route, which you're still playing live with people, but it was kind of like, I'm going to leave this job that I have, a salary job, and do art essentially,
Right.
like full time. Like, what was that kind of the thinking behind that, and what led like to that decision?
Yeah. So like, I guess first, like the jump to like being a producer instead of playing instruments, like playing live for a living, was kind of, I always liked playing live, but it always seemed very momentary. Like it was all very like an event kind of thing where you like get ready for this tour, you get ready for this big show, or you're playing in this band and getting ready for some showcase or whatever it is. And it always felt like these were just glimpses and moments of like of your art, and like it always like ended very quickly, and there was never really like, it was hard for me to see like a big longevity side for me, where it's kind of like, okay, if I play this show, where does it go from here, and like you can always go, and there are incredible guys out there that are still growing to this day, and it blows my mind. But for me, it was just like, okay, all of this is going to end after the few months that I'm like doing this, and then I have to find another event to be a part of. So for me, the fun part became, the producing side of it came when I decided I wanted, like, we started recording some of the stuff for Sunday morning and just kind of seeing like, oh, okay, it's really just people that are doing this. It's not some crazy like robot or alien that produces music. And then trying to do it for another project I was working on for kind of really got me like excited, because you could be in the writing, you could be in the live side of it, and the legacy of all that stuff was so much more than just the like 6 weeks you were going to be out on tour, if you were lucky enough to get that long of a tour. And you're kind of like, once your stuff's out there, it's like, and especially now with the internet, it's kind of like there forever, and you kind of have legacy to build on, and it can impact way more than just whoever you get to be in front of for that 6 weeks, which was like my approach to it. So I started to kind of shift my mind to wanting to do that side of the musical game less than playing live shows, just because I wanted to be able to build and look back and create for like longer than just a tour or however it works,
I remember, and you brought it up earlier, but you and I drove my old car from here to Texas to drop it off with my dog at the time.
That was awesome.
Because Grace and I were moving. But I remember on that trip, which was awesome, we did it in like a day, and it was super fun.
I don't think I drove one time.
Dude, even when I go with Willix, I drive.
Yeah,
I go on the road with Willix.
I didn't drive once, and I didn't DJ once. It was like solid.
But I remember on that trip, we were talking a lot about that, and like we were kind of even talking about with Apollo Sunday Morning Apollo Hotel at the time. It was like we kind of were throwing around the idea of if we'd be okay when we just like peaked. Remember, like, right, I remember we were like talking.
That conversation's still in my mind a lot. I think about it all the time.
Yeah. And I've been playing in bands since I was like 14, like, really playing in bands. And it's like, it took me a long time to get to that point, but it was, and what we were talking about on that trip was like, man, I don't know if I can stop progressing in something, you know, I don't know if I can just get to a point and then be at that level for the rest of it. Some people can do it and do it great, and it's amazing.
Yeah, totally.
But just for me personally, we were talking about on that trip, like, I don't know if I would be able to do that. I think I would either go crazy or get bored or whatever it is, you know?
Yeah.
Which was part of the decision why I was kind of getting out of doing um, music full time, if you will.
Right.
But then you were using it, like what you just explained. It's like you were able to take that, maybe even that thinking, and turn it into something that can be sustainable and that you can keep progressing in, that you enjoy.
Yeah.
I think that's cool.
Yeah. It was always, that conversation sticks in my mind a lot, that like, what do you do when you plateau?
Yeah.
And if you're always chasing, like, how do you get bigger as a touring artist? It's like, oh, you play bigger venues, you play in front of, you get on these bills, and then sometimes like you do, and then where do you go from there? Like, you know, like,
yeah.
And that feeling of like, it's funny to see those guys that I know that are, especially when they were starting like in bands and like are starting to get out on tour and everything, and just how far the crash is once they get home, even if they're like, no, they're going out again, just like how miserable like real life becomes, because you're in that like crazy, that high, and you're always chasing that next high, which is good because that's what your job is at that point. But then you get home and like you can't be at home because it's like, oh snap, like I want to be back out there doing that thing, which is cool, and it's great. But for me, it always seemed so like I couldn't build that way, because I would get either bored or just like, I don't know. The fun part about producing is you can always move the blocks, you know, like okay, how do I work with bigger artists? Okay, how do I work with people who nobody knows? Okay, how do I work with only this kind of gear? How do I work with all of this gear? How do I get into that studio? How do I make this studio my home? You know, like you can always kind of change and choose what your plateaus are. And in the end, in the end, just make good work. And you got that forever, and you can remember that time. And like, I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
That was my way to combat the plateau.
No, I think that's it. And there is that level of like finding the contentment, and some people do it great and they don't have a problem with it and they love it and they're killing it.
Yeah.
And that's just as okay, you know? It's like,
I think the other side of that you actually, another conversation we had was doing music for fun. And just how, for some reason, maybe it's just that we live in Nashville and you lived in LA, and like, that's kind of like entertainment heaven, where you're always chasing to be the biggest of whatever it is. But like, what's wrong with a weekend dad band, you know, like,
for sure, yeah.
That sounds like the most fun on the planet to me. You just like, we don't want to grow. Like, we want to just have fun goofing off with our buds, and like just keep that spirit alive of like making music and not putting pressure on you to do it, and like keeping music kind of pure in that way, especially when you're like getting into art and doing art so much and like forcing yourself to like be creative. It sours so fast unless you have that like kind of like innocent, like, you know, that like it's still got to be fun at a level. And so that was interesting. I think a lot of like community would be built so much more if we had weekend dad bands like more often, where they're just like, we literally just want to play in this one bar as often as we can, and we'll know everyone that comes in that bar, and that's as far as we'll go. And you'll like us, you know, like that kind of thing, where it's just like you can gather around that totem pole that's not going anywhere, you know.
So you went from that, you still play out a little bit, and now now you're really focusing on the producing, and then you have a project with your sister, Pina. That's the one, right?
Yeah. I got to send you, we got masters back for our EP, so I got to send it to you after this.
What's it called?
It's called Conversations. I do like I don't know if I did it well enough, but it's like, you know, an extremely goofy movie where they have that spoken word part. And she's like, life is like a line. Like, that's how I started the whole thing off. And it's awesome.
That with me on time.
Because life can stop on a dime.
I like when PJ gets good at it. He does it.
He's so cool.
That's sick. So Pina's still going, which is just pretty much you and your sister Kelsey now, right?
Yep. Pretty much. I try to include as many other people as possible in it, just because it keeps it fun too. But
our friend Kelsey, our trumpeter, our friend Ashton in Florida on the trumpet.
He slays it. I literally just give him random prompts and then say, do whatever you want. And then he'll give me like 6 like tracks of just amazing everything. He's
Yeah,
like, yeah, I just tried it. It's like, whatever, man.
he's
You're amazing.
So that's going good. And then we have our project Super Style.
Our weekend dad band.
We have
Except only one dad.
2 EPs out.
One of them's a Christmas album. I mean EP.
We did a Christmas EP, and then we have the real EP. And that obviously you're doing most of the engineering,
Uh-huh.
and the production side of it, which is cool. That's you and me, and then our friend Cassie. So that stuff's been cool. What else have you kind of been? What's like coming up next? Like, what do you kind of try to get into, or what do you want to do? I mean, also besides music, you do art too. Like, you paint, you draw. Like, are you doing any of that stuff anymore? Unless besides when I even draw something for myself.
The random Nolan request that I have.
Yeah.
I don't really do as much painting lately. I got commissioned for a piece recently, so I gotta go do that at some point. But I haven't been doing as much of that. This is all kind of a big learning curve to jump off and do this, to do producing. So that's kind of like all consuming right now.
Yeah.
But I do want to get back into it. I've been doing a lot of woodworking lately, which is random. Like, I built my desk and been building random wood pieces, which is fun. And then just writing on my own. And then I have a couple songs. I have an album I did with a guy coming out in April, which will be cool. His name's Jordan Tyler Poole. He's awesome. He's a sick writer. And then a couple of singles coming out for some other artists I'm working on. So it's cool. It's cool because it's like they all come in like seasons. So it's like now is like release season. So starting to see all those songs come out, which is fun for me.
Stuff you've been working on.
Yeah.
For a while.
Yeah.
That's sick. So if you could, what would be like the in a year, or let's say 5 years is too long. Well, let's say 2 years from now, you're like, obviously we get past all the craziness that's going on right now.
The end of the world.
Yeah. But you're like, man, I'm doing it. This is cool. Let's ride this wave. Like, what does that look like?
Oh man. I think for me that looks like being in a killer band being in a killer band as like a member, and then writing it's writing soul tunes, if that makes sense, kind of soul R&B stuff, which is not really the like vibe here in Nashville, but ideally that's what it would be. Sure. And rocking out of other people's studios would be the ideal too. So I spent so much time in these walls.
These walls, man.
These walls, keeping it down.
It's one of my favorite Luke stories. When you were the guitar tech for a live project.
Yes.
We were both part of.
That was amazing.
And there was a song where he just played an acoustic. And you were supposed to tune his guitar. Well, actually, I don't know. There's many sides.
There's conflicting stories about that.
But someone thought that they were getting a tuned guitar. We won't mention his name here. And he goes to play, and it's just out of tune.
It is off, way off.
And so and this is a live. They're filming the entire concert. So he's got to stop and go, you know what? I'm sorry, and apologizes.
Because that song starts with an acoustic guitar riff.
And Luke's just standing on the side of the stage, just like, oops. That's one of my favorite Luke stories. I
forgot about that until this moment. Now I'm embarrassed.
I'm glad I could bring it up. And then I got two. Another one it was a Sunday morning show. It was at this high school, and
Oh yes.
and you come up to me right before, like 30 minutes before we were gonna play, and we're like, "Hey, I forgot my hi-hat, my hi-hat stand." So you tried to go buy one, but it was like prime traffic time.
Yeah.
You couldn't get through. So you came back and you were like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. So you made you just put two you put two hats together on a cymbal stand. first hit, the whole thing
Falls over.
falls over.
Was a bad idea from the start.
and the song hadn't really started going yet, so it was loud. You could hear it just smack the floor.
It's like the Counting or something like that. Forgot about that too.
Amazing, dude. Amazing. Those are my two favorite Luke stories.
That was hilarious. I remember the way it looked too. It was like because the things aren't tall enough to like have two hi-hats on them. So the top thing was like the screw on the top like barely turned once, maybe.
It's amazing, dude.
It was awesome.
That was by far the worst show we've ever played.
So far.
The PA was also messed up.
That was fun.
Eric sounded like a robot. So.
I remember somebody came up after. It's like, you guys are awesome. That PA was not.
Oh, amazing.
That was fun.
Amazing.
Well, it's fun now. Wasn't fun at the time.
Fun now, not fun at the time. All right, awesome, man.
It was
well,
wild.
I'm glad that things are going well. You're digging it, or digging what you're doing at least, to moving forward. I'm stoked to see kind of where things go. Anything? Or I guess you already talked about the stuff that's coming out soon, right? So,
Yeah.
that's your
Super Style song coming soon.
Yeah, if we can get
Maybe.
if we can get Nick Rybacki to record his vocals. We're doing
It's the end of the world, not the end of rock and roll. Calm down.
Our new single has an old singer of mine on it, but he hasn't recorded his vocals yet. So, that's for the thousands of fans right there.
All 1,000 of them.
All 1,000. All right. Well, I think that's it, dude. Thanks for joining the world digitally.
Zoom.
This is the future right here.
This is how we hang out from now on.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess I'll just say keep on making stuff,
Hey.